the meeting right now, and we've got Peter Stevenson from Modern 8. He, again, I would suggest connecting with him on LinkedIn. He's got a great background on LinkedIn and has some amazing experience. I met him through my previous work, and he did a great job for my employer, TVC, and have been following him on LinkedIn and his posts, and they're really insightful and really interesting to me. So I thought it would be great for us to have him share some of his insights on marketing, branding, etc. I'll let him jump into the presentation. Peter, if you've got a presentation, I think Michaela can let you basically share your screen, but turn the time over to you right now, turn the screen over to you, and you can take 10 or 12 minutes, and then we'll jump into Q&A after that.
Myself. You guys see that okay?
Looks great.
Great. All right. So these are I'm going to talk about some questions that we think every brand should answer, as specifically right now in this place where there's a lot of confusion about what brands should be doing or saying, and I think that this can help brands think about what they should say in sort of a chaotic time period. So you can take notes. Any of you, if you want to send me an email afterwards, I'm happy to send this over to you as a PDF doc so that you can answer these questions yourself. But I'm gonna try to go through this pretty quickly. And then I'm happy to answer questions or however this format works here. So this is sort of our philosophy at Modern Day. And I want to talk about this because I think this is really important in some of the questions that we try to answer later. You know, we really focus on this emotional idea, which then changes the perception, which changes behavior, which ultimately is going to drive the performance of a brand. No matter what that brand is, the emotion of it is really what you're going to lead to that real performance in the long run. This is the process that we take everybody through. The questions that we're going to answer today are in this D3, this middle part. So to do this exercise, I think you need to spend some time working on this discover thing. You need to do interviews with clients, both internally and externally. You need to look at who your competitors are and try to understand who they are. You know, that sort of thing is going to allow you to then make sense of what that is. And then, once you do the discover, make sense of it in D2. D3 is our depict. This is where we present the questions that we're going to answer today. And then we work on design and deploy. Modern 8 does these things. I'm not going to spend any time on it. So these are the three pillars that we build brands on at Modern 8. And again, I think anybody can do this for their own brand. And that's kind of the idea of this presentation, is give you those tools to then answer these questions. So what's the brand personality? What's the brand perspective and the brand positioning? So your brand personality is sort of like the perspective of both internal and external, and how your brand behaves. The perspective is kind of the way internally you view the world, and your positioning is how you are positioned in the marketplace. So brand personality, the first thing that we try to answer is, what are the adjectives that are determined from the perspective of your customers, and also the ones that you would use. If you're a startup, again, you don't have any customers who have any viewpoint of you, you're not going to be able to get a personality from them. But if you are a large company with multiple customers, you're going to be able to go to them and find out exactly what they are. And interviews with customers, surveys, those sorts of things can sort of drive you to understand that. With a company out of Silicon Valley that we worked with a year or so ago, these are the adjectives that they came to in trying to understand who they were as a brand. Aspiration, caring, innovative. These are the ones that their customers wanted to be, used to describe them, as well as internally. So the question you need to answer then is, what adjectives do you hope your customers and or clients would use in order to describe your brand? You should actually have, and it shouldn't be generic. It shouldn't be like fun, engaging. If you go back to this, like these are, the right choice, the aha moment. Those are not just generic terms. You should try to have some really deep thought into what that adjective is. Words are very meaningful if you can dive into that. So that's question one. Question two are, what are the core values that you're going to do? So what drives your brand's decision making? What are the moral compasses of your brand? These are those core values from Surehand. Go fast, go slow to go fast. Embrace right, lead from within, and how can I help? So the question you need to answer, and I would say, what are the four most important values of your company? So how are you going to solve this problem? And I think companies get into a real pickle when they try to list a dozen values. You should have some top line values that are the company values. And then, put some understanding about what those are underneath. Those are just some articles that we have on our website about it. The next thing is the point of view. This is the way your brand views the world. So Noosh is a company here locally that make keto cakes. And so their point of view is your life should be delicious without adding unnecessary sugars. Say Noosh to sugar as that idea. So what is the point of view of your brand? So you need to answer this question about how you see the world. What is the way that your brand is going to see the world? Are you optimistic? Do you have a certain viewpoint about what should happen? Those are the questions that you need to answer. So what is the point of view? And that's going to inform these next things. What is the promise? So the promise is, what is the pledge you make to your customers? And and it is what your customers entrust you to deliver on. So for Noosh, we promise to help enhance your on-the-go lifestyle, your post-gym moment, before your next meal, or during the times when you just feel like it. So again, this incorporates what they sell, with their viewpoint, and this is the promise that they ultimately make. These are internally focused ideas. So what is the pledge that you make to your customers? This is that promise that you're going to make. This should be explicit and understood throughout the entire viewpoint. The purpose. So this is why you're ultimately in business beyond making money. You've probably heard, Seth Godin, Simon Sinek talks about this. The idea is, people are going to buy into what you're trying to do. One of the brands that I think does this really well is Tesla. Tesla's whole purpose is, less about creating some car that's electric, but the idea behind it is, the world's going to end if we don't do something about the environment. And that was that idea of the purpose behind it. And so that purpose is sort of led throughout the entire product. So companies that have a real clear purpose will find customers who can trust them to a greater extent. So for Noosh, healthy and delicious snacking choices should be accessible and flavorful for all, from those who choose health to those who must watch their health. These purpose, this sort of like brand perspective is really something that's internally focused, that leads employees and founders to have the same idea about how to launch their brand. It helps everybody have a clarified message about what you're trying to do. So what are you really trying to accomplish, and why are you in business beyond making money? One of the things we like to ask clients in here is if you are ultimately successful and everybody buys your product, what is that end result that you're trying to get to? If you're selling something that provides security, IT security, if everybody buys your product, then the ultimate goal is that, people who steal, IT secrets are not going to end up with any money. Whatever that thing is really, it helps you to launch that real long-term goal about promise and purpose. Brand positioning. So this is something that we have been doing for about 20 years now. And as far as I know, I don't know anybody doing this similarly, but it's what we call the only. This is your unique offering, the thing that only you can claim. So, how you may need to get really specific. We're working with a company right now that does not have any competitors, and there's nobody else who's even in the same space as they are. And that only is really easy. The thing that's really hard is if you are going up as a copycat. If the thing that's the same about you is the same about a dozen other people, This thing is really, really hard. Hotels have a really hard time with this. They all are basically the exact same thing. So you need to come up with what that thing is, and you may need to get really detailed about what that is. But this helps in your marketing about what you are selling and what you can claim that nobody else can claim. So Little Unicorn is a company here in Logan. They make swaddle blankets and other products for babies. So we sort of helped them come up with this only statement. Little Unicorn is the only Muslim company who develops products with their design to make process. If you know their products, the design is very detailed, and it's really the ultimate selling point behind their brand. So the answer is, what is something that only you can claim? And you want this to be as broad as possible, but my guess is as you work on this, you're going to have to narrow it down into a place that is very, very specific. And then you need to think about, what is the competitive advantage? So this is the advantage you have over your competitors. It can be different for each competitor, but there should be some advantage your target buyers see in your company over your competitors. If you're a small company, the advantage may be that you are small and can address their very specific needs. You're nimble, you're able to call them, they can call the CEO. That may be a real competitive advantage over a big competitor. But if you have somebody who's really similar to you, maybe it's the ability to, maybe it's the ability for you as a company to, service them quickly, or maybe you take longer and dig more deeply into a product. Whatever it is, you need to think what that competitive advantage is, because your marketing should be built upon this competitive advantage. So for Little Unicorn, we had 3 competitive advantages that we had here: having the best quality muslin on the market, having a design to make process that is scalable and repeatable, and having employees who have passion for the brand. So these were the ones, again, looking at their competitors that we felt they had. And again, this is your specific target customers. You shouldn't care if you're selling products to, like Little Unicorn, to people who have young children or new children. You shouldn't care what somebody who is 70 and doesn't have any grandkids in their life thinks about your company. They're not your target buyer. You should not care what your non-target buyer says. There are lots of different brands that care too much about what everybody thinks, when you should really be thinking about what your target customer sees in you. There's I'll send this to you if you would like, and you can link on some of those things. But that's the presentation, and happy to answer any questions that people have.
Peter, that's awesome. I love it. I was typing stuff in the chat, and I want everybody to type their only in the chat and have you feedback on that. I think that would be awesome. I would also be interested in hearing how you identify competitive advantage. Do you go through the competitors' features and benefits and say we're better at that? Or how do you identify competitive advantage?
It really depends on the company. So, let me try to think of an example here. There are companies that have a better product all the way around, and every competitor that they are going up against, they have a better product. So an easy one to think about is probably Lululemon. They have a product that the quality of their product is often seen as a higher quality across the board against any of their competitors. Under Armour, Nike, anybody in that space is, Athleta, and they're priced accordingly. So their competitive advantage is not price. So they are not going to beat anybody by having a cheaper product, but they're going to beat everybody by having a better product. Now, you could go and say, okay, well, let's think about what the competitive advantage of Athleta is, which is a competitor of Lululemon. So Athleta, they are associated with Gap, and so they may have a better ability to, scale accordingly because they have, partners in Gap and Old Navy and Hill City, used to be Hill City or whatever. So there are some things that you can think about. Is it price? Is it quality? Is it the ability to get to, a place? Is it distribution? Is it brand? Is it, your there are some places that think about competitive advantage about how much they give. Like Tom Shoe's whole idea, right, is, like you buy a shoe and we'll give it away. And for some reason that was cool. There was a long period of time where the people's competitive advantage, the only thing they really had was that they gave away stuff. But there are companies that do that, like Warby Parker. So Warby Parker gives away glasses, but that's not at all what they're known for. So their competitive advantage is not the same as what you would think about, like Tom Shoes or something. So, those are some of the ways that we think about those competitive advantage. And you should actively go in to any competitor that you have and say, what are my competitive advantages over them versus what are my competitive weaknesses? We do that with Modern 8 all the time. And I think that's pretty important to think about in a competitive marketplace, because your marketing should be built, these pillars are set and then the marketing is built on top of it. So if you want to say we're cheaper than everybody and it's not true, that's not going to do anything for you. It's not the competitive advantage that you have. So if that's not the answer, you need to find a different way to say why you should, someone should buy from you. So that would be my answer, and it is not something that I don't know. It's hard to do, and there's a reason why people have a really hard time doing it, but it really just takes like asking customers why they would buy from you versus somebody else, and propagating that out across the board.
That's helpful. Thank you. So far, 3 people have put their onlys in the chat. I also got a private chat that said someone didn't actually know what their only was. So that's interesting.
Well, hopefully they can figure that out. And I think that if you can come up with this, if you can go and you can figure out your only, and you should go and talk to customers about this. This should be a question that you ask. I think if you can figure this out, your marketing will be a lot better. There's a reason for you to talk about what you do in a much more interesting way. I'm reading the onlys. These are good.
Can you feed back on any of them?
Let me read. So let me read them. So SOS Productions is the only recording studio that the only recording studio that partners with high schools to provide audio production to students and professionals at prices no one can beat. So again, if I think about this one, and Tyler, I think this is really good. One of the things that you have in there is who it's for, and the real selling point of this is that you have the cheapest prices. So, in the end, could you then go and say, okay, SOS Productions can be the only recording studio that has prices that no one can beat? Are you able to go into different verticals and places because you have something that can do that? Or is it really only specifically to high schools? So that would be a thing that you want to make sure that your only works. But I think that this, if I was in high school and I was selling, if I needed this, I would reach out to you. Like, I think there's a real solid reason to think about this as your only. I think that's good. Brian Hale, Peace is the only app that allows users to both give to those in need and receive from those willing to give completely anonymously. I think this is great. I think it's a little confusing. I think that one thing, Brian, I would think about doing is Peace is the only app that allows users to both give and receive anonymously. I think people, you probably don't need to talk about those in need and those willing to give, because if you're giving, you're willing to give, right? Like, you don't have to add in those extra details of like, if I'm giving, I'm willing to give. If I'm getting it, I already know that I'm in need. So I think you could even shorten it down, as the only anonymous app that allows users to give to those in need, might be a better way to put it too. So, I think that, I think it's great. And after this, will you add me on LinkedIn? I want to try to find a way to give on your platform. Do I have more time? How much time do I have, Tyler? Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, we will usually just say at 11:45. If people need to drop off, they can. But typically,
Okay.
a lot of people will stay on until the top of the hour and just pepper you with questions. So you just keep going
Okay.
until people are
Great.
done.
And I will say this, like, I'm going to go through these, but if you have one and you don't want it to be all the way out loud, feel free to send it to me privately, and I'm happy to help anybody. Say, all right, so let me go up. Vera Analyst Consulting is the only non-law firm consulting firm that reduces the cost and anxiety associated with healthcare insurance payer audits. Okay, that is a mouthful, and I have no idea what that means. But I would imagine if you're a non-law firm, are your prices better, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Are you less expensive than a law firm?
Yes. Like, for instance, if you hire me for an external audit, it's like between $1,000 and $1,500 straight up. Or they charge a consulting rate per hour if it's on an audit for $300. I didn't mean to put firm and firm, two words from each other. That was
no, that's fine.
But basically, after searches and everything, there's not companies that do a lot of what I do, except for there's some law firms. And there's a lot of companies that will investigate healthcare providers, but there's not a lot that will provide audit assistance outside of like coding and things like that. But that's not what I delve into.
You know, I was talking to a law firm last year about something, and one of the reasons that they felt like people hire them is because of that lawyer, you know, the privacy aspect of having a law firm look at stuff like this. So, you know, maybe there's a way to talk about, you know, why yours is better in this only. So, you know, it reduces the cost and anxiety associated with healthcare insurance payer audits. You know, I'm sure that's a very unique group of people who cares about that stuff. So, right. You know, like I would talk to them and say, what are the things that, you know, do you care if I'm a non-law firm or not? If they don't care, then it's not an only that's worth selling, right? But if they care very much if it's a law firm or not, then that's going to be hard. But if they don't care, then maybe there's some other aspect of it that you can talk about related to finances or something else. So yeah, I'm not sure, but I think it's great. I don't know what healthcare insurance payer audits are, but I'm now curious.
I mean, it's your Medicare, Medicaid, United Healthcare, all those things. So
okay.
So I did throw the challenge out to everybody for their only, but I don't want to capitalize that being the only topic we talk about. So if you have other questions for Peter, just unmute yourself and ask him.
Yeah, if you have a different question not related to only, I know that's really easy, and I'm happy to go through anybody on this call and talk about it. But I'd love to hear if there's any other questions besides what the only.
Hey, I was just curious if you have any tips for kind of that discovering that, you know, those interviews with clients to try and get their input on, you know, why they went with you, or maybe like how you can provide the best value. Is there any tips you'd have so as not to get biased information from them, or, you know, like to get kind of straight to the heart of the matter? Sometimes maybe they have something that could be improved that could be shared with you, but, you know, sometimes people are shy about sharing that information.
You know, that's one of the benefits of using an outside company to go ask those questions sometimes, you know, so, you know, they feel like they can share a little bit more. So there's two ways I would go about it, Jake. Number one is you should just ask people, you know, and again, people lie all the time, and they will probably lie to you about something, and there will be a bias in everything they say. There just is. You know, I was reading a book yesterday about how, you know, market research is stupid, you know, and how you shouldn't listen to any of it. You know, there's this whole thing that the idea of asking people is worthless. And I think that there is a portion of it that is probably true. But the thing is that you're not going to get any information just by guessing. So I would say just go start asking people. The thing that you should ask is, you know, why did you choose us? You know, what about us, you know, keeps, you know, if it's a long-term project, you know, why do you keep coming back? If probably the most interesting thing you can find out is to find people who didn't choose your product, and went with somebody else, and interview those people. Find out why they chose something different. That's probably the most interesting thing that you can gather if you can get that information. Why did someone not choose you is going to be a better conversation than why did someone chose you. But I think really it's just find people and ask them. You know, if you have a technology product, there's a lot of things that allow you to see how people's eyes and mouses move on a screen. And I think that's really interesting. But I think the best thing that you can figure out is try to understand how people view you as a brand and your product. And the more that you can ask people, if you can ask 10, 20, 30 people, you know, for 10 minutes of their time, I think you would get a pretty good understanding about what to answer. So I think just ask. I mean, that's literally the thing I would do is just ask people if they're willing to talk to you.
Got it. Cool. And
It is hard though. It is really hard.
And would you say that, you know, like kind of the more you can ask as far as like quantity, the kind of the better off you are kind of thing?
It depends. What I would say is like, you know, you probably have, you know, say you have like 5 different types of people who buy your product. You know, you've got, you know, somebody who's younger and doesn't have as much money. It's a little bit more of a stretch. You know, I'm not really sure what you sell. So, you know, we try to say, okay, what are the different personas of people who are buying? And then let's talk to a few different people who buy it for a different reason. So, you know, Modern 8, we work with startups who are just starting a company, and we work with, you know, sort of mid-level market companies to rebrand their company. And so those are 2 different personas of people who buy our product. And so when we do this research for ourselves, we go and make sure we ask some startup founders and we ask some CMOs of mid-level companies to then, you know, because we want to understand both of their viewpoints about how they see us. And so those are the sort of things that you want to say is, okay, what kind of people are buying? And let's get input from a bunch of those different people.
Got it. Kind of some of your different customer segments.
Sorry, say that again.
So you're just saying you're trying to hit all your segments.
Yep.
Cool.
And I would say, and probably the most important thing to think about is gender shouldn't be a segment. You know, like the people who are interested in mid-mod houses and they are and really good design have the same buying ideas across gender. You know, other than very specific gender-related products, gender is not a really good persona development skill. People are buying for a lot of different reasons outside of gender. And so I would say you should think about, try to find a higher level attribute of what those people are and what you're selling outside of that.
Got it. Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions that I can answer, or did you like me going through the onlys? I don't know. I see some head nods.
What do you think, Taylor?
I would say if people have questions, jump in. I'd be interested in hearing Modern 8's only. So we argue about this probably more than anybody because we have lots of different viewpoints. I think the last only was, we're the only, we have a couple. So we're the only brand design firm with a 5D process that launches brands, was one that we had. I think that I am a bad person to speak to this because I literally was arguing about this 2 weeks ago with our co-founder. So I don't have one that I think I can share, but I think the only is really, we're the only brand design firm that focuses on design as a skill that sells products. So that's probably the biggest one. Okay.
One other messages from
that's
people.
Good. One other question I had is, if you go through the 5Ds, if everybody on the call wanted to engage Modern 8 and go through this process, what exercise would you say is the best homework for all of us to do, to bring to you and say, okay, I did all of this up front, now what? Like, what would be your homework assignment for everybody to make sure that we have the right things in place?
You need to talk to your customers first. You know, like if you are selling and everything's going great, and you know, like we really come in when, like, people shouldn't hire us if sales are going great. You know, if you're having a hard time selling and the value proposition of your brand is not there, then that's the point that Modern 8 can make a lot of sense. If you are not selling very well, and you know, maybe you're losing out to other people, then the value proposition is not going great. You know, if your click-through rate on your ads isn't going well, then you need to talk to us. You know, that would, and then the thing you need to do is ask your clients why they are buying from you and people who didn't buy from you. And if the answers are like they have a hard time understanding the value that you bring, then at that point you should come talk to us. And then homework, just be ready to engage in a lot of activities. We're, you know, Modern 8 as a firm, we only bring on 1 to 2 clients per month. So we're not like able to take on a lot of work. And with that comes a lot of touches. So we talk all the time to our clients. How do you find out the others and why not you? This is a good question, Haley. So the question is, how do you find the others and why not you? So how do you find people who didn't buy your product? You know, it depends on you as a brand. You know, with Modern 8, I know who didn't buy our product because I gave them a proposal and they chose somebody else. And so I'll often talk to those people 6 months later and find out who they worked with, how it went, why they chose somebody else over us. So, you know, that's the way that we do that. The way you can do that is, you know, you can find out who came to your website and started to fill out a form and then didn't. You know, there are technical tools that allow you to do that. You know, it really just depends on what you're doing. You know, you could, if you're selling a product in stores, we've done this before, where you're on a retail shelf, you'll stand at the end of an aisle and you'll watch and see who chooses your product and who doesn't. And you'll ask people why they chose the other thing versus you. So those are some ways that you can do it. Just really depends on what you're selling to answer that question. Does that answer your question, Haley? I think.
Hi, getting off mic. It's Hallie, by the way.
Hallie, sorry, I apologize.
No worries. Just because we're all of us on calls time and again. But just to say, as a doctor, one of the challenges is the soft sell approach. You know who makes the appointment and who doesn't. So that's another way, besides of standing on the shelf line of the aisle. But often it's an intangible thing, because when you're talking about customer service rather than a product, then you're often dealing with making sure that the satisfaction is also not this niceness factor or someone needing to feel as if their needs are unmet. And as a clinician or as a consultant, you don't always have that sense of straight up information. And trying to set that all up is not easy if you're doing it on your own. So I appreciate your company coming up with strategies, but it might be helpful to distinguish the service industry and the professional industry and consultants from the product industries.
Yeah, I think the answer is, like, you know, we really feel like the things that we do work really well in both that service industry as well as products, and that the goal is to ask a bunch of questions to a bunch of people and then answer those questions. You know, these questions that I shared with you are the ones that we use internally and say we need to make sure we answer them. And so while that is true that it's different, you know, in reality, the user, you know, the UX researchers who are reviewing how people use their product should be the same as you as a service provider use to figure out how people use your product. So, you know, you're just asking questions and trying to find out whatever data is the right data to use and then answer that data. You know, my guess is Every has a digital product that they sell and people use it and there's user research on that. But then you're also selling to a company and there's some user research on the people who are buying the product for their company, right? So, you know, that's a good example of a product and you know, the product is utilized by the UX researchers and they're doing some research there, but there's also the person who buys the product for their company and there's some user research there. So that was probably a good way to think about it. And what else? This is good. I like most of you. Not you, Spencer, but everybody else I like. Hi, Spencer. Spencer's great. If you don't know Spencer, you should get to know him. He's the best.
So Peter, we're coming up close to the top of the hour, and I think we've had some people drop off. So I think let's wrap it up right now. One of the things that I'm thinking about doing is on LinkedIn, just thanking everybody and posting some of the onlys that they've presented here. So that's one thing that is a takeaway for me. But the other things, like on the competitive advantage, this has been really helpful. I think understanding the difference between product and service and how you can talk to those things, also really helpful for me. So really appreciate this and your time. We're getting to the point where we will have transcripts and the presentation recordings in the LinkedIn group. So look for that. But thank you so much for your time and educating us, Peter.
I also had a few requests for the slide deck, if you are able to or willing to share that.
Yeah, so I have a worksheet that we created for people that I'll send.
Perfect.
And you know, the slides won't look great because they're, you know, highly designed and font based. So
Totally.
we have a PDF of a worksheet that people can actually use that has room
Cool.
to answer the questions. And so I'm happy to send that to anybody.
That'd be great. If you want to just send it to me, I'll send you my email and I can send it out to the group after later today.
Okay, I'll just
That works.
I'll just send it in LinkedIn. So
Perfect. Perfect.
And feel free to reach out. I'm happy to work with anybody who showed up today on their only if I didn't get to yours today. So you know, I apologize if you put it in there and I didn't answer it.
Well, thanks so much, Peter, and thanks to the group. Appreciate it. We'll be back next week, Tuesday at 11. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See y'all next week.
Bye.